Hey, come see us live. We're doing our Rumble Time show September 27th in Los Angeles. We'll be in Tempe, Arizona, and we'll be in Burbank, California. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. In fact, because it's 9/11, I just wanted to play this for you. This is a video of Donald Trump talking on 9/11. Now, let's remember, this guy was the president of the United States. The deep state has tried to kill him. The deep state did Russiagate. They don't want him talking or telling and this is why, because he tells the truth every once in a while, and they can't have that. Well, listen to what he said on 9/11 about the World Trade Center. Watch this.
So the World Trade Center was always known as a very, very strong building. Don't forget, that took a big bomb in the basement. Now, the basement is the most vulnerable place because it's your foundation. And it withstood that. And I got to see that area about 3 or 4 days after it took place because one of my structural engineers actually took me for a tour because he did the building. And I said, I can't believe it. The building was standing solid and half of the columns were blown out. I mean, so this was an unbelievably powerful building. If you know anything about structure, it was one of the first buildings that was built from the outside. The steel, the reason the World Trade Center had such narrow windows is that in between all the windows, you had the steel on the outside. So you had the steel on the outside of the building. That's why when I first looked, and you had big, heavy I-beams. When I first looked at it, I couldn't believe it because there was a hole in the steel. And this is steel that was, you remember the width of the windows of the World Trade Center, folks. I think you know, if you were ever up there, they were quite narrow. And in between was this heavy steel. I said, how could a plane, even a 767 or 747 or whatever it might have been, how could it possibly go through the steel? I happen to think that they had not only a plane, but they had bombs that exploded almost simultaneously, because I just can't imagine anything being able to go through that wall. Most buildings are built with the steel is on the inside around the elevator shaft. This one was built from the outside, which is the strongest structure you can have. And it was almost just like a can of soup.
You know, Donald, we were looking at pictures all morning long of that plane coming into building number 2. And when you see that approach the far side, and then all of a sudden, within a matter of a millisecond, the explosion pops out the other side.
Right. I just think that it was a plane with more than just fuel. I think, obviously, they were very big planes. They were going very rapidly because I was also watching where the plane seemed to be not only going fast, it seemed to be coming down into the building. So it was getting the speed from going downhill, so to speak. It just seemed to me that to do that kind of destruction is even more than a big plane, because you're talking about taking out steel, the heaviest caliber steel that was used on a building. I mean, these buildings were rock solid. And, you know, it's just an amazing thing. This country is different today.
So here is a first responder, Kevin McPadden, and here's what he said he heard that day.
The Red Cross rep was like, he goes over and he says, well, you got to stay behind this line because they're thinking about bringing the building down. They didn't say what building. They just said bringing a building down. So we're like, okay, you know, we'll take their word for it. You know, we'll stay behind the line. And he went over and he talked to one of the, through all the commotion, he goes over and he asked one of the Red Cross, or one of the firefighters, what was going on. I guess, I don't know if he got an answer or not. He came back over with his hand over the radio, and what sounded like a countdown. And at the last few seconds, he took his hand off, and you heard 3, 2, 1, and he was just saying, just run for your life, just run for your life. And then it was like another 2, 3 seconds, you heard explosions. Like, boom! There's like a distinct sound. It's not like when compression, like boom, 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 like floors that were dropping and collapsing. This was boom, and like you felt a rumble in the ground, like almost like you wanted to grab onto something. That, to me, I knew that was an explosion. There was no doubt in my mind.
So, on that day at 9/11, 2 planes knocked down 3 steel buildings that fell into their own footprint. Never happened before, never happened since. It all happened on one day. Isn't that amazing? And now we had on the head professor of engineering at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and he did a study into this, and he revealed that according to his research, there's no way that Building 7 fell into its own footprint because a plane hit another building 100 yards away. He said there's no way that's the way, and the buildings would have fell a different way if that was the case. They didn't fall that way, and so anyways. So what I just want to because it's 9/11 and the fact that you weren't allowed to question 9/11. Whenever you're not allowed to question, you know they're up to some kind of fuckery, right? So if you're not, and by the way, you know how they took the term conspiracy and they made it toxic because of the JFK assassination. The CIA, if you had a theory about how that happened, you were called a conspiracy theorist. Even though people are charged in court every day from coast to coast with criminal conspiracy, if you say somebody else is doing a criminal conspiracy, they call you a kook. You're a tinfoil hat nut. Just like they took the term truth, people who wanted to get the truth about 9/11, and they called them truthers. So they made the word truth toxic. That's the power of propaganda. So just if you could just take a few minutes and just give me, your thumbnail sketch on what you like to tell people about 9/11.
Well, I mean, there's still a lot of unanswered questions. I mean, what you just played about Trump's reaction being that, a bomb may have been involved. If your producers can look up right now, the gentleman whose name is Imad Salem, Emadsalem, just because Trump referenced the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Well, Imad Salem was the FBI informant who was a part of the team that planted the explosives inside the basement, the bombs inside the basement of the 1993 World Trade Center. And then when the bombs went off and the 1993 World Trade Center bombing happened, to the shock and horror of the world, Imad Salem published his secret recordings with the FBI, even gave evidence to the New York Times. This is the only thing that stopped him from being indicted as a co-conspirator. Is he said, actually, I'm not a co-conspirator in the plot. The FBI paid me to plant the explosive materials, but they told me they would swap it out with phony powder, but they didn't. They let the bombing happen. They made the bombing happen. He basically, said, I mean, this is printed in the New York Times. The audios are on YouTube. Anyone can listen to the Imad Salem. So we know that the FBI effectively bombed the World Trade Center in 1993. So let's but without getting too deep in the weeds on the 2001 event. I mean, remember that when it happened in 2001, there was no social media. Facebook didn't come out until 2004. YouTube didn't come out until 2005. Twitter didn't come out until 2006. And so for the first 3 years after 9/11, there was no even ability to put together pieces of evidence in a way that could add to what everybody else was doing. Apologies if there's an ambulance in the background with the sound here.
We can't hear it.
No, go ahead.
Okay. But the rise of YouTube and the ability to actually share information about 9/11 is one of the first, gave rise to one of the first episodes of intelligence penetration into domestic online activity that we're aware of. If folks know the name Cass Sunstein, for example, Cass Sunstein is the Harvard professor, but he's married to Samantha Power. Samantha Power, who is the head of USAID, which is the major CIA funding arm, and he's currently at DHS helping with their illegal immigration policies. But Cass Sunstein wrote in 2006 through 2008, he wrote a series on conspiracy theories online and made the argument that the rise of 9/11 skeptical YouTube channels was undermining American diplomacy around the world because it was casting doubt on the United States narrative about what really caused 9/11. And he proposed several methods for the U.S. government to neutralize the rise of truthers on YouTube. And this included, his famous catchphrase, everything from essentially crude censorship mechanisms down into cognitive infiltration, which is putting federal agents inside of these thought leadership movements and then steering the movements either into not believing what they were currently already saying or going so crazy that they would be able to be dismissed. And so this was not just some Machiavellian plot by a random homeless person. This is the second half of one of the most powerful power couples in all of Washington. So powerful that Samantha Power's post is equally as powerful, effectively, as Avril Haines, the ODNI director, because USAID has a budget almost the size of the entire intelligence community. This is why when DHS Secretary Jed Johnson was asked about whether or not he would support Kamala Harris over Joe Biden before Biden stepped down. He said it doesn't matter so long as Avril Haines and Samantha Power are still have the positions they have. So, we're living in the aftermath of the national security state crackdown on questions about that event, even 25 years later.